Good evening or morning or afternoon or whenever you're watching this, but it's evening here. Just a little mod to my Britannia today. I was struggling to drive it yesterday, passed its steam test, ran like a dream, it's working beautifully. However, I was struggling to see the pressure gauge. I'll show you a picture where it was. Now, although it's fairly easy to get underneath it, I'll show you the problem. So I've already started this, but it was up there. So when you're driving, you can see the water gauge through that gap there, but you're having to really look over or get down below to see the pressure gauge. So what I'm going to do is move it either to there, next to the water gauge, so it can be seen from above, maybe even slightly higher, or go in between. Haven't quite decided what yet. I'm going to speak to a couple of friends and then I'll carry on making this. In the meantime, I have made a start. So unfortunately, the pipe on it wasn't long enough to go to a new position, because I could do with it being a little bit lower. So I have quickly turned on the lathe a banjo, found a bit of pipe. I'm just going to solder them together. Having soldered it together, as you saw, I've bent it, annealed it, bent it, and I'm going to cut it to length, solder an olive onto the end, selection here, remembering to put the nut on first, and then finish bending it in situ with the gauge already attached. And so, now fitted back in place, which isn't far off where it should be on full size. When I'm driving, I'll be able to see the water gauge and the pressure gauge quite easily. So that is that for now. I just need to clean it from yesterday's running. So with the pressure gauge sorted, repositioned, I've also taken my attention to the only other issue I had on Sunday, which was the lubricator. It had filled up with water, so I took it apart, took the clack apart, and it's got the very nice Martin Evans design in it, but it did have a slight problem in that the clack had a bit of like woolly, stringy stuff in it, possibly where the lubricator's been left full for so long. Who knows? But I've cleaned all that out. But I also decided I wasn't happy with how much oil it was getting, assuming that it was getting it in the first place. So I thought, I'll just move the drive down or up the arm slightly, because it was only getting one click on the lubricator. So I've moved it up the arm to the top hole, and it was still only getting one click on the lubricator. So I've decided to take it apart and start looking at putting clutches in. So what we have here is the pot. I've taken all the guts out. That's the spring for the ratchet that holds it back, the shaft with the drive that goes onto the pump, the tube that goes through, and the arm that drives it with the ratchet on that side. I've already made a replacement one of them with a slightly bigger tube. So what I'm trying to do is not destroy any of this, make all the bits I need to make, so I can always change it back if I want to. And here is said basis for the tube, threaded the same thread as the original. That's the size bar I had. Needs to be bored out for the pump, not for the front, for the ratchet, clutch. I think it might be too long at the moment. but I'm waiting for the clutch to turn up, and it still needs to be drilled out. So what I've done, I've turned faced a block that I just had, a bit of scrap I had, drilled it, tapped it so that this can be screwed in, and that way I can machine this end of it with it running as true as possible, because that's not coming out until I'm done. I will just make that a bit smaller so you can see a step, and then I can look at machining this end and boring it to the right size, and then it can be faced to the right length once the clutch turns up. So with that finished machined to the dimensions of the clutch, hopefully when it turns up, the next thing to make is the shaft. So that's a 2.5mm shaft, or around that size. I have another piece, but the clutch is for 4mm. So what I'm going to do is use this new bit of shaft, turn it to put a thread on the end, much like that one, for, I believe it's 6BA, and then I'm also going to chop it to length and do the same at the other end, so that it can go into a piece of 4mm shaft and be screwed into that. Screw the two together, and then when it goes into situ, it can be screwed onto the eccentric as well. So let's give that a try. So I've had to put the shaft making on hold because the collets I've got are imperial collets and don't go down small enough for this one anyway. So I've ordered a collet holder for an ER32, which is what I've got in the mill, so I can use the same collets, and when that comes up I can machine them and they'll run nice and true. In the meantime, I figured I'd make the arm to drive the spindle. So we've got the cup which will hold the clutch to stop the spindle turning back. Now I've made another cup to go on a clutch to drive the spindle in the first place, and we are going to solder that on there so we've got an arm. Now I've taken the dimensions of these holes off of the dimensions of these holes, plus I've left it long just in case I need to put more in. So yeah, we've got a bit of adjustment. So I'll solder this together, and then we'll have to wait for the collets and for the clutches. So let's go and do some soldering. Now all I've done is I've just wiped some emery on that side just to clean it up, because there was some dirt on there. It looks pretty good, and there's a nice build up of a solder fillet on that side, so I'm happy that that's going to be good. We just need to wait for the clutches and collets to turn up. I've had some clutches turn up, so let's fit these into the drive arm and the pot, and we'll still wait for the collets to turn up to be able to machine them quite accurately. So I figured while I was waiting I would cut the 4mm bit shaft to length. Let's come on, put a hand wheel on the end so that you can see what's happening and you can advance it by hand. So that goes through the arm there, and then goes into that piece. Unfortunately, the problem I'm having, you probably can't see too easily, but that clutch is loose in this one. They're both machined with the same tool, but that one's tight, that one's loose. I think it's because that one's then been heated up and soldered. So I'm just going to put a dab of Loctite on the outside of this one and then push it back in. And then over the next couple of days, when the collets turn up, I can centrally drill and tap this one, turn and die the smaller piece at both ends, one to go into there and one to go into the crank at the other end. I've already done it, but I should have pointed out I put the Loctite on the outside of the bearing so that when I push the bearing in, the excess would appear out here. Had I put it on the inside of the housing, then when the clutch got pushed in, the excess would have come in here and could have got into places I don't want it to be. So that's why I went that way round. So while we wait for that to turn up, I will also have a look at something else I've been thinking of, and that's increasing the capacity of the lubricator. Now when we look where it goes, there's plenty of space behind the lubricator. So what I'm going to do is fit an extension to the tank. I'm going to solder that on first, then I can drill a couple of decent sized holes in the bottom and the top to let the oil in and the air out, and vice versa. Then I'll sit it on that and solder that on the end, and we should end up with a nice big tank. So now soldered on, I've had a slight change of plan for drilling the hole at the bottom. Drop some sawdust down there. I'm going to use a hole saw. The one I've chosen is 22mm. I did find 25mm in there, which was a nice, but it was a touching fit going down the hole. Almost used that, but I changed my mind. I'm going to use 22 and then see where we go from that. And there we go. A little bit of deburring and jobs are good. And here we are, ready to solder onto the bottom. I've fluxed it all up, laid it on top of these two bits of copper strip, so hopefully the heat can go underneath and heat up the brass plate in the middle as well. There's not much of it showing, and yeah, hopefully we can get a nice solder around it. And there we go. Soldered up, cleaned up, all the excess filed off, and I have even tried it in the engine and there's plenty of space around it still. So that's a much bigger oil capacity. So we can start putting it back together. I'll give it another little wash out, get rid of all the swarf, and then it's ready to be put back together. So if you're wondering what's happened to my face, you'll have to watch a future episode because something's going on through the door that is the next episode, hopefully. But today I got back from work and sitting in the on the tining table in a box was my collet chuck. So I'm just going to fit this to the lathe, and then I can start to look at machining the shafts for this lubricator. So there we have it. The smaller diameter is threaded 7BA, the bigger diameter is drilled and tapped and also turned and threaded. Both pieces have been Loctited together, and the way it all goes together inside the pot, as it's being done up, as it's being driven, it's always trying to tighten the threads. So there we are, fully assembled. I have put a little dribble of oil in the bottom, and let's, moment of truth. Did I get it the right way round? Look at that. Perfect. So now hopefully I will get a little bit more oil through the lubricator. You see, the problem with ratchets is you're reliant on two separate ratchets reaching the point that they grab, and in the case of this, whether it was just at the wrong point of the cycle or if the ratchet had been in a slightly different place, I don't know, but I was getting one click on the ratchet. I moved the drive up the arm to give it more movement, and I still only had one click on the ratchet. Because the clutches don't lose any movement, as soon as you start to turn the other way, they lock up. You get all of the movement of the drive. So now, hopefully, I'll have more control over how much oil goes into the engine. I added an extra couple of oil holes down the arm in case I get too much on the same setting. So that can go back on the engine, and then next time I get a chance, we'll give it a run and see what happens. And there she is. Fully installed. The longer arm doesn't seem to be getting in the way. One last thing to go back. Now next time out, we'll see if that works. So thanks for watching. That would be it for the Britannia until we get a chance to run it, which, who knows, I may get out this week, I may not, just depends what's going on. So in due course we will get that tested and we'll see how it goes. So thanks for watching, and I will get back to you very soon with the next project next door. Goodbye.